We're a couple minutes behind. I don't know that that makes a difference, but I am going to get started. Well, we want to welcome Kelly Peach to this next session. Her writing career began in radio and evolved to include advertising, public relations, corporate communications, TV, and nonprofit. She is in her first year as a communications director for Mercy Health System. We'll pray for you later. Prior to that, I'm so sorry. Prior to that, she spent nearly 15 years at St. Patrick's Center, managing communications for the mission to end homelessness. I find it just so intriguing that all of these corporate experiences, and now she has made this transition into author, and her first two novels are historical novels, and they're based on the life of Elvis and based here in Memphis. So I am very excited to hear about this kind of shift that went on in your brain. So welcome, Kelly Peach.
Thank you so very much. I am excited to be here today. Before we start, how about a word of prayer? If we can bow our heads for a moment and remember we're always in the presence of God. This is a prayer to St. Francis de Sales, patron saint of writers. May the Lord guide us and all those who write for a living. Through your prayers, St. Francis de Sales, we ask for your intercession as we attempt to bring the written word to the world. Let us pray that God takes us in the palm of his hand and inspires our creativity and success. St. Francis de Sales, you understand the dedication required in this profession. Pray for God to inspire and allow ideas to flow. In his name, let our words reflect our faith for others to read. Amen. Thank you so much for having me. I was just mentioning that this is the collision of my worlds. I am a communications person, and this is a communications conference. And I am an Elvis fan. And I'm at Graceland. I've been here many, many times, but I have never been privileged to stay in the guest house. So thank you, thank you, thank you. I also am very proud to work for Mercy. Are there any Sisters of Mercy organization folks at this conference by any chance? Okay. Gotcha. Hopefully I can see them later. All right, so let's move forward. As she said, I'm Kelly Peach, and I wanted to point out that I was formed by sisters, and that included the SSND at Our Lady of Sorrows. Yay, yay, yay. At Our Lady of Sorrows in St. Louis. It's now closed, boo-hoo, but it was a beautiful K-8 experience. And I was also formed by the Sisters of ASCJ at Jesu Academy in St. Louis. So you can see a few pictures. Are there any ASCJ organization? Are they here too, but maybe in a different room? Sister Carol Sansone in the middle. She had broken her arm when we graduated from high school. And then Sister Ellen Cronin, both active sisters in the St. Louis region. So also, as the intro mentioned, I've been able to earn a paycheck as a writer for more than 33 years, and that's probably part of what prompted Kim to solicit me for this. And by the way, I'm in formation at Mercy. I'm literally in an 18-month advanced formation, so we're always being formed, right? We're never really going to get there completely. So I want to take a quick look at what we're going to talk about today. Everyone is a book. That's the title of this, but that's also all of you in this room. And we're going to talk about when we wear our creative cap and when we wear the business cap. Some lessons learned, love to share those with you. A few odds and ends, and some parting thoughts. Those are fun, right? Who doesn't have parting thoughts? And I hope that I can get to the end so we have some time for Q&A. All right, my biggest thing is to remember to advance the slides. Okay, so I am not one of those folks that is blessed with children and future grandchildren. So in all of my years of getting used to that, I've accepted it and I've decided I'm going to leave behind a box of books. And so I am currently what I would like to call 3 of 5. I have self-published 3 of them, and I've written 2 other children's books, and I'm currently working with illustrators on those, and I have journals full of other things I want to do. So my legacy behind on the planet Earth is hopefully going to be a box of books. So I want to tell you quickly about these books that we're going to, and they're kind of the inspiration for this speech today. So I'm an Elvis fan, and the first book that I wrote is called Waking Up in Graceland. And the best way to summarize it is to read the back cover. And it is that it took a lot of trying, but Maggie, obsessed with Elvis her entire life, has finally convinced her local newspaper to send a reporter with her to Graceland. The story gathering experience starts out well, but after a night of partying on Beale Street, Graceland has changed. It's December 1960, and guess who's home for Christmas? And then you write one book, and if you're blessed, people will love it and want you to write more. And I did end Waking Up in Graceland so that there could be more story. And then the sequel came out 3 years later, and it's called Amazing Grace. What happens? Back in her hometown, Maggie is falling in love fast but unwilling to let go of her time with Elvis in Memphis. She'll do whatever it takes to return to the king of rock and roll because she has something important to tell him and someone she wants him to meet. So that's book 2. And there will be book 3 someday if I can find the time. And then I was very blessed during the pandemic to come out with my first children's book. It is called The Kitchen Bowl Gang. And they were a friendly bunch until a couple of strangers showed up. Feeling challenged by new stories and unfamiliar company, the buddies joined together to make themselves feel better, but at what cost? Thank you for indulging me in those summaries, but it's a good way to intro what we're going to talk about, and that is that everyone is a book. Let's talk about some 3 core areas. The first one being idea. And I really believe that is, as your wheels start to turn in this room, and is anyone working on a book? Does anyone have an idea for a book? Okay, great. I bet you all have things in your life, stories that need to be, some people think, oh, it's just my life, nobody would care, but we all have things that happened to us and journeys we went on, or periods of history we're obsessed with. So write about something you love, care about, or have a burning desire to share. This could be things you've written in journals. It could be the stuff of reality, the stuff of fantasy. It could be your story. You don't really ever know when that light bulb is going to go on. In the picture in the top right, that is me on Beale Street, right here in Memphis. It's actually a reenactment of when I had my idea, because I got obsessed with Elvis in 2009. I was raised on rock and roll. I'm a child of Elvis and the Beatles and all of that. My dad was a rocker. Thank you, Lord, for that. But in 2009, I was in a kind of a relationship that was falling apart, and I just came down here from St. Louis, my hometown, and I immersed myself in all things Graceland. Now, most people can do that and survive and be normal. But some people do what I call getting sucked into the vortex, the Elvis vortex, and you're never the same. That was me. Have any of you watched the Elvis channels in your room? Have you been in your room long enough to see those, like channel 50? I mean, I've watched those 100 times and I couldn't turn them off last night to see that man. And so I'm on Beale Street. I'm having a beer. I'm listening to blues music and obsessed with Elvis. This was in 2009, and this light bulb goes off. And it said to me, Waking Up in Graceland. And I knew. I literally, the idea was born. So remember Blackberries? I had a Blackberry. And so I ran into the restroom and sent myself an email, idea for a book. And that was how that particular idea was born. Again, not knowing when that light bulb's going to go off. So I was ready for it. And then the idea for the children's book, you can probably tell I'm a fairly passionate, energetic person. It's kind of hard for me to stand still up here. But I wanted to write a story about passion and about finding what your purpose is and loving it and just embracing that. And so one of the things that came to me was the passion fruit. I'll tell you a little bit more about that as we move on, but that was really sort of how the children's book was born. Now we can talk about genre. So you can go really broad if you're thinking about what genre am I going to write. There's fiction and nonfiction, right? but you can definitely get more defined. I mean, you can go on the internet and find so many, but science fiction, young adult, mystery, romance, memoir, poetry. There are so many. What's mine? Historical fiction. And these are, I love this. I read a lot of these books. Philippa Gregory, one of my favorites, who's written about the Tudors, up and down the line. And it's stories that take place in the past, but they imagine the reconstruction of historical events and people with as much accuracy as possible. Some characters can be fictional. So I had to do a lot of research about Elvis Presley. I needed to know what he was doing in December of 1960. Because my dad said at one point, why do you care if it's correct or not? I said, Dad, when the Elvis fans read it, they're gonna know. They're gonna know if I got it right or not. And so I did a lot of research, but then my main character, Maggie, she was born the day he died, August 16th, 1977. She travels back in time. So I'm inserting a fictional character into my favorite period of history, right? And so that's what historical fiction is. As far as audience, I think this is really important. Every story has a core audience, and don't be thinking that you're going to please everyone, because you can't, right? We can't please all the people all the time. But there's not something in your book for everyone. So think about your who. Who is going to read your book? And another question, who's going to buy it? Who's going to buy your book? And with that, I'll just tell a little story about a former coworker at St. Patrick's Center in St. Louis. She's a former sister of St. Joseph. And her name is Ann Rotterman. Some of you might know her. She devoted over 30 years of her career to St. Patrick's Center and counseling people experiencing homelessness, dealing with lots of substance use disorder, behavioral health issues, all of that. And so she decided to write a book and self-publish it a few years ago. And she put together they were like chapters of the people she had counseled, the people that really resonated with her over all of those years. Kim, do you remember the title of the book? I don't remember the title, but she self-published it through Amazon, and she donated all proceeds and continues to St. Patrick's Center. So you don't exactly have to try to do this to quit your day job or anything. If you feel compelled to give back to an organization or something like that, it could be a work of charity. Mine was to pay the printer and the designer and all the things we're going to talk about. So let's put on our creative cap. And that's me with my creative cap. My cousin had a Easter bonnet decorating contest at her house a few Easters ago, and I won. She's a crafter, so she just put everything on a table, and we had to, in a very short amount of time, had to make an Easter bonnet. So there's a lot of ways to put on your creative cap when you want to start thinking about writing a book. There's not one right way, you just find your groove. I advise to keep a notebook with you at all times. I have them in about every room of my house, even in one of my dresser drawers in case I wake up, because you don't know when God is going to inspire you. So keep a notebook. And then if you are digital, of course, we live in a digital world now, so if you're jotting all that into an iPad or a tablet or a computer, whatever it might be, backup, cloud, backup, because imagine, I used to live in fear of that when I started typing up my first book, that something would happen to my computer and I would lose everything that I was writing. A tip that I learned is about 250 words equals a page. So you just kind of say, okay, well, how many pages would I like to go for? Or maybe that's not a concern of yours, but just to give you an idea of how many pages your book would end up to be, 250 words equals a page. And I set a goal of 50,000 so that I could write a 200-page book. Daydream all the time, unless you're busy during the day. Then, after you say your bedtime prayers, of course, dream up those scenes as you try to fall asleep. I can't even tell you how many times I did this. I just immersed myself. I guess I became my main character, and I would throw myself into a scene with Elvis and his people and say, well, how's that going to go? What's the rise and fall of that? And there's, we all have nights when we wake up and we can't fall back asleep, or we can't fall asleep. Say your prayers and then write a book in your head, and those will really take you far. They really will. The organization part of it is to build an outline, the essential elements. I think this is super important because your mind's going to be all over the place. Like, how do I structure this? Where is it going to be set? What's the plot? Who are the characters? you probably know about a protagonist and an antagonist. It's difficult to write a story that doesn't have some force, if not a human being, against your main character. Some journey, something has to happen to your main character that they're going to go through and come out on the other side. That arc of that story. What's the dialogue? Who's talking to who? I was so nervous about writing the words of Elvis Presley, but I read so many books and did so much research that I felt like I had a sense. And plus, there's plenty of things to watch as well. And then you've got, what's your situation, building up that conflict. How's it going to be resolved? You can go really, really deep. I've heard, I really want to write a screenplay someday, not that anyone will make it into a movie, but I want that. That's a science that I'm very intrigued by. And they say that if you're writing a screenplay, if your catalyst, which is something, that first thing that happens, if it's not happening by about page 10, which is about 10 minutes into the movie, you haven't done your job. So if you think about some of the movies you watch and some of the things you find on the streaming services and you're about 10 minutes in and you're like, I'm going to move on, maybe that catalyst hasn't happened yet. The foreshadowing tool is really, really fun to use. It's fun to look for in the things that you read and watch because they're little plot devices that are planted that you might not pay too much attention to, but oh my goodness, that author is planting those for some future fun. Of course, you have subplots. Stories get pretty boring. Episodes get pretty boring if there's not some other things going on behind the scenes. And in Waking Up in Graceland, for example, Maggie takes a reporter to Graceland in the year 2006, and she starts to kind of crush on the reporter that she's taken with her on this exclusive behind-the-scenes tour of Graceland. So there's a bit of a subplot there. There's a relationship developing in modern time, but then she's going to travel back in time and meet Elvis Presley. And then, of course, there's something called a pinch, which is that big event about halfway through. And then the rising conflict, so you can start to see you're building up and some stuff's going to happen to your characters, and then you've got to start to resolve it and come out in the end. And then finally, write about writing, write when you're inspired. I really practice this and believe this too. You don't have to write your story in the order that it's going to be revealed in chapters. If you wake up some weekend and you got time and you know how that first sentence is going to go, that first paragraph, that first chapter, write it. But then a week later, you're like, oh, I know what the big conflict's going to be. Write it. And then when you figure out how it's going to end, which I think is the hardest, is how is the story going to end? And could I, if you're writing something that you'd like to be a series, how do you end it so that people want more without feeling like they didn't get enough out of what you wrote? With a full-time job, I wrote almost everything on weekends. You're all communicators, right? You're kind of done with that by the time you get off work, right? And that energy is hard to find. It was hard for me to find creative writing energy at night. So I did almost everything on weekends, threw a duffel bag in the car, came to this town. There's a little Days Inn down the road, a little bit more in my budget. And I would stay there. I would go visit with Elvis. There's free walk-up every morning from 7:30 to 8:30 where you can go to the meditation garden without having to be on a bus or go on the tour of the mansion. And I got my inspiration and got a lot of it done on weekends. Flashcards. I thought this was also helpful as well. When you start to get scenes and chapters, put them on a flashcard. Some chapters have 3, 4, 5, 6 things going on, scene after scene. Like, how when you're reading a book, there's like maybe a skip and, there's a couple lines skipped with the blank space and something else is going to happen. And lay those out on the floor. I'd be in a hotel room and I'd just lay out chapters 1 through 18 or whatever it is, and you start to see, wait a second, there's way too much going on in chapter 3. Like, is that the right structure? And so I found having my scenes that I really wanted to include really helped having them on flashcards. How long does it take? Well, I will say it's a marathon, not a sprint. And I started in 2010, early 2010, with Waking Up in Graceland. And we had the release on Elvis's 80th birthday, January 8th, 2015. I'm looking at Kim because, by the way, Kim used to work with me at St. Patrick's Center, and she's one of the best hires ever. And I'm just so proud of her to watch how her career has evolved since we were together at St. Patrick's Center. Her maiden name is Zamistil, and I used to say, if you want the prescription for the perfect employee, take Zamistil. So then, after people started buying and reading Waking Up in Graceland, they said, we want more, and I was freaking out. I'm like, okay, this just got real. And I counseled with a few authors that I knew, and they said, that's a big deal, and you really need to do it. If there's more story, and they want more story, listen to your readers. So I got to work right away on on Amazing Grace. And so I was able to do that from 2016 to 2018. We launched that in 2018. And St. Louis has a place called Blueberry Hill with an Elvis room. So of course we were there for both of those parties. And I had graduated to having an Elvis tribute artist perform at my second book party, because I did truly immerse myself in the Elvis world after this, with going to festivals and being a vendor, selling books, meeting people from all over the world. So I had an Elvis tribute artist perform at the second party with 3 costume changes. So, hey, yeah, why not? And then children's books. Hey, a lot of people want to write children's books. They come together quicker. There's not as many words, right? The story is important, but there's not as many words. So I executed on my children's book, and my mother, I forgot to mention my mother is the illustrator of the first book. And it was just such a blessing, because it was a pandemic, and she's 79, and she was home all the time, and she was doing her artwork, and we put this beautiful piece together. And so that was from 2019 to 2020. So you can kind of see that I got a little faster. That first one took a long time out of the gate, about 5 years, but then more like 3 years and 2 years. So just to kind of give you a benchmark. Here comes the fun of the business cap. And I say fun a little sarcastically, but if you're going to self-publish, at some point you have to take off the creative cap and put on the business cap. And an author advised me that it's difficult to wear both of them at the same time, and I can totally vouch for that. So 2014 comes around, I put on my business cap, and I decided to form an LLC and print and sell my own paperbacks. The reason, I know you all know about Amazon. Everyone knows someone who's self-published on Amazon, and I'll mention a little bit more about that in a minute. But I was about to write my first novel and publish it, so I wanted books. I wanted boxes of books. My friends and family were saying, well, we want you to sign a book. You're not going to sign somebody's Kindle, right? Nothing wrong with that. But that's the route I chose. And at the time, 98% of all books were self-published. It could be even higher than 98% right now, because so much has changed since 2014. And I understand the indie author, the self-publishing indie author world is really only about 15 years old on the digital side. So, print on demand, we'll talk about in just a minute. Just some business. Okay, so I'll go through this as quickly as possible, but again, you built your outline creatively. Now it's time to build a timeline. So there's tasks that need to be completed. Some are fun, some are not. Nearly all of them are necessary. Editor. Got to have another set of eyes. Hands down. The people who don't do it regret it later, because you do make mistakes. I mean, there's even mistakes you make in storytelling because you might not have linked one thing to another. In your brain it is, but you forgot to write it. So get someone to read it and get someone to proofread it. Red pen, you print it out for them, old school, and have them do that. People will point out your typos. There's more. I had an editor, the same editor did both my paperbacks, and I don't think she tried as hard on the second one, and I have enough typos in Amazing Grace to make me sad, because I'm a communicator and we don't like typos, right? We don't like grammatical errors. Oh, yeah, it hurts my heart that there's typos in there, but people will point them out. You have a typo on page 65. Yes, I know, I hate that. So anyway, get an editor. And advanced readers, this is a cool thing that I not that anyone gave me this advice, but I thought of doing it because I wanted a handful of people I really trusted to read my first book before I took action on it. And I picked very smart people, very avid readers. One was my sister, and one was the graphic designer who did the beautiful cover. And they read it. I gave them about maybe a month to a month and a half, and I gave them manuscripts and binders, so they had their pens. Let me tell you what, these folks will make your book better. They'll ask questions. They'll find nuances, like I said, maybe a couple of errors, and I could not have lived without them to the books that I have. Designer, even though you might not think about it, you need someone to come out with the cover. The most important, obviously, are the cover and the back. But then who puts together all these pages? Somebody's got to lay that out in InDesign probably, right? So I happen to have a designer I worked with very closely at St. Patrick's Center in St. Louis, and she was really excited to work with me because she would like this on her resume as well, that she had designed a book. So I worked with a designer. It was not for free, but I know she gave me a really good rate. And they also do the work of getting the files ready for the printer. That's kind of a painful process for any of you who have had to do that. It's kind of cool to have a designer to do it, get that stuff over to the printer. While all that's going on, you've got other content to write. There's the title page, which comes, right when you start going into the book. And there's the copyright page. Remember that one? I love looking at these when I look at actual books. And you've got that fiction disclaimer. This is a work of fiction, names, characters, places, and incidents, da, 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 da. Okay, it won't necessarily hold you harmless completely. I had to be careful because I was writing about Elvis is a public figure, but a very, very protected brand. So I literally did consult with an intellectual property attorney just to be careful. There were a couple of things he asked me to tell him the plot and characters, because almost everyone in my books was alive. Some of them are still alive, some of them have passed, but they were real people that could read my story and say, I never did that, I never said that. So we were careful, and that's probably TMI, but it's just my story. And so we put that disclaimer in there, and most authors do. But just as a word of advice, it's if you're really writing about something protected, you might need a little more protection or consultation. Can't forget the author's note. The author's note in the back. If there's a bibliography, I felt compelled to do that because I read so many books. I wanted people to see, I didn't just make this up. I did my homework. And of course, the about the author page as well. I don't know if you like to read author's notes, but when I get to the end of a book, I really do like to kind of see their humanity come out and how they say thank you at the end of the book. Printer, you all know this. I'm starting to preach to the choir on a few of these, but get more than one bid and compare. The price of paper is bad now. It's gone up about 4 times during the pandemic, so I'm waiting on those children's books I'd like to get together. The business of it, real quick, I formed an LLC with the Secretary of State, registered for a federal tax ID, registered to pay sales tax, opened a business bank account, got an accountant. And another thing you don't think about is that ISBN. What you do is you buy an ISBN number, and it comes out with a barcode. So there's a number at the bottom that will be uniquely yours to your book, and these are about $150 a pop. And if anyone's real curious, Bowker, B-O-W-K-E-R, is the official ISBN agency of our country. And you can find all kinds of stuff there. That's the point when you're going to have to decide what the price of your book is going to be. And so I did have a learning lesson. I put $19.95 on Waking Up in Graceland, and then I was like, that's too much. So it does say $19.95. But I sell them for $15, and then I do 2 for $25, so when people want both of them. But yeah, it's a good decision to make before, because once it's built, you'd have to buy a whole nother one to change the price. Marketing, now this is your area. So website, you might want a website, and you're gonna have a little bit of a fee for domain and hosting. I mean, my gosh, I think I'm paying less than $30 a year for that, but and WordPress is so easy. You can have a website done in an hour probably. Social media, I will say, was so great all those years ago compared to how it is now. Now it's pay to play. If you want people to see your book posts on your book page, buck up. It's a shame. I do it, but I don't spend money very often just because it's kind of like something I don't want to do. But social media is very powerful, as we all know, to spread the word. PayPal and Square. So what I do on my website is I have little links that are like little buy now links to PayPal. It takes people to PayPal. And then when you land on that page, you go right into your PayPal account and you buy the book, and then I get a message that people are ordering books. And yes, I do sign them, personalize them, get them in the mail. There's labor involved. And then when I'm at a festival, I use Square. You might already have Square in your life for one thing or the other, but that little thing that sits by your phone or plugs into your phone is wonderful for credit cards because hardly anybody has cash these days. And when I was in Canada at the Niagara Festival, it was like, got real confusing because it was Canadian money, but you can figure it out. And some of those devices don't work when you leave the USA, but there's ways to get through that. Budget, we're kind of talking about money here. It's kind of the boring stuff, but make sure you've got a budget of, these things we're talking about here, and then like postage, envelope, labels. If you're going to do it, you're going to have some expenses there. Last but not least is the copyright. So once you actually have your book, and for me it was hard copies, you send a couple of those off with an app. You set up an account at copyright.gov. And there's a fee. I think it's about $55, maybe a little bit more. And it got really weird during the pandemic because all those folks were working at home, so they just said, we're not reviewing any books for copyright. So you have to send them 2 copies of your book with these very official forms, and then you wait and you wait and you wait. But the good thing about it is now if I handed you this sheet of notes and signed and dated it, any of you, it's copyrighted. But will it hold up in court that I wrote something on a piece of paper and gave it to you? Not necessarily. So that's why you take the time to go ahead and have that official certificate come in that says you are copyrighted. So that way, for example, if somebody tries to write book 3 before I do, they can't. They can't. These are mine. They're copyrighted. Okay. How are we doing on time? I said it, but then of course my phone turns off. So we got about 7 more minutes? Okay, let's rock. Lessons learned, song lyrics. Just as an aside, see the little hound dog? You can put the names of songs in your book to tell your story, but you can only use 3 words. And that is, that one, you ain't nothing. Would have been all I could have used for the hound dog song. So you have to get permission, a license required from the song owner. And you have to note it in the book. And I did that for 2 songs. One of the songs there were just 2 songs I'm like, they have to be in the book. One of them is Somewhere Over the Rainbow from Wizard of Oz. The other one is Moody Blue that Elvis sang because he gives Maggie the nickname Moody. So again, I wanted to plant a seed with everyone like, whoa, did this really happen? Because like in 1970 something, he sang Moody Blue. So anyway, I worked on that, and that was interesting. Sony owns, start with Sony. They own almost everything, but you kind of have to find out not who wrote it, not who performed it, but who owns it now, and you pay a little bit of a fee. If you have public domain, which is in the case of Amazing Grace, that song is so old that it's in what's called the public domain. And public domain right now is anything published before January 1, 1926. So I was able to use the lyrics to Amazing Grace in the book Amazing Grace without having to do that rigmarole and get permission. Family and friends have great ideas. The girl in the middle picture is my best friend from high school, who was one of my advanced readers. She reads so much. And when she came back to me with her manuscript, she said, it's a dream come true for anyone who fantasizes about hanging out with his or her favorite celebrity. I was like, that's going on the back of the book. And that's her finding out. She didn't know until right then that it was on the back of the book. And they really will be wonderful people, your editor and your advanced readers. Throw a launch party. My editor and I are with Cardboard Elvis in the lower photo on the night of his birthday that we released Waking Up in Graceland. I will be hard-pressed to find a better night of my life. If you put through that much work and you have people who love you and support you, throw a party. It doesn't cost that much. And invite the media. I know you all know how to do that, right? And we had many media attend. Kim Westerman was there. And some of the media even got in line for my signature. I was like, you're kidding me. You have a media pass. Charlie Brennan said, I'm getting in line like everybody else. And I got a couple of radio interviews out of it, instant sales. Fox 2, our local Fox affiliate, showed up and got some footage and ran something. And I was a communications director, so I had those relationships. I'm actually speaking in another hour or so about that topic. And and then with the Kitchen Bowl Gang, since it's got biblical inspiration that I haven't really alluded to yet, the St. Louis Catholic newspaper, the St. Louis Review, was all over it, helping me promote the Kitchen Bowl Gang. Definitely build awareness through social media. And word of mouth, I will say, no matter what social media can or cannot do, you will sell more books through word of mouth. A few more lessons learned. Gather email addresses for future communications. Emails sell more books than word of mouth is great, but oh my gosh, email versus social media. So have a little thing where people have to, like, when you're taking down orders or something, where they got to put in their email address. If they're ordering them online, you're getting their email address. Build those up for future communications so they can spread the book even farther. I want to comment on Elvis's faith, since we're at a religious communications conference. He loved the Lord. Really, those are his roots. His music has so much infusion of gospel. And he won 4 Grammys in his lifetime. Every one of them was for a gospel work. Do you know him singing How Great Thou Art? Yeah, he's a Grammy winner for that. My favorite thing I ever learned about Elvis in all of my research has to do with Barbra Streisand. And don't you love my cheap little edit up there in the upper right? Well, okay. So she went to his concert in Vegas. They went to the after party. She had a producer boyfriend. She was making a movie called A Star is Born. She wanted to speak to Elvis about playing opposite her. The party was so loud, they went into the walk-in closet with him and one of his guys. So 4 people sitting in a walk-in closet talking about her pitching this idea to him to be with her in A Star is Born. He got so excited because he really wanted to be known for being a good actor. That's one of his heartbreaks in his life, that those movies got so campy that it wasn't in his control. So he's like, Colonel Parker, his manager, I am going to be in this movie. Well, Colonel made it so difficult that it didn't happen. And you know who got the part in the movie? Chris Christopherson. So that is, I just cannot, I would love to go see the movie that Elvis would have done with her, because that story, that plot was very true to what Elvis was going through in his life at the time. I think he would have slayed it. I'm saying like maybe an Oscar for him. And then probably going to run out of time for Passion Fruit and Sand Dollar, but those are 2 of the characters in the book. And they have religious symbols. And inside the Passion Fruit and then the Sand Dollar, do you know about like the wounds of Jesus, the 5 wounds of Jesus? Oh, I love the head nods, great. So that's really where my story developed. Passion Fruit comes to the kitchen into a bowl of fruit, and they're like, what are you? And she's so passionate, but then she tells her story. I help teach people about Jesus because I have special symbols. Well, then they bully her, and the next thing that lands on the kitchen table is a sand dollar. And he has the same purpose too. So that's kind of the plot of the Kitchen Bowl Gang. A couple of odds and ends. Okay, so print, on demand, ebooks and audiobooks. I mentioned that just a little bit earlier. It's really gotten crazy, busy in the past 15 years. Amazon kickstarted it, and it used to be called Kindle Direct Publishing. I'm sorry, it used to be called Create Space, but they changed it in 2018 to Kindle Direct Publishing. So they own it. There's a lot of other places you can find on the internet, but the owners of selling books, print on demand, audio, and ebooks online is Amazon. And someone in this room knows someone who's doing that. I'm even thinking about becoming an Amazon seller, but I got boxes of books I need to sell too. And then you could go the route of trying to get an agent, sending proposals, trying to get a publisher. I didn't want to waste any more time. I just did it myself. I think that's part of the reason, to speak about this today is you can do it yourself. A word on pseudonyms. I don't really know myself to be anyone but Kelly Peach, so I just went with it, but I have a coworker now who has books under a pseudonym that she uses as her book writing, and then my mom just discovered an author on Facebook with books who happens to be my brother. He hasn't even told any of us. My brother, 2 years younger than me, has 3 books, and it's under a pseudonym. Okay, never give up. Never give up, be tenacious. Go after bookstores. They might have you do a book signing. Give them a free review. Any bookstore I call, I give them a free review copy. And then when they decide to do a deal with you, they're either going to buy your books wholesale, you'll come up with a wholesale price, or consignment. And usually that's a 60-40 split. Author 60% and them 40%. Those are real consistent. A word that independent publishers and bookstores, those little places in your hometowns, they don't like Amazon. Just a tip. Maybe don't go in if you're on Amazon, don't tell them all about that. It's a big deal that you've done it, kind of like Ron Burgundy. It's kind of a big deal. But I also truly believe that it's not a big deal. I mean, everybody does great and amazing things, right? So it fits nicely. The fact that you have written a book, everyone should know about it. It's a position of respect. Pay it forward, but be humble because other people do it too. Bask in the glow of positive reviews. You'll get them. And wow, I mean, I could go on and on about that. I knew the women would probably like my book, but the men do. Wow, a girl that travels back to hang out with Elvis, the guys like it too. Author Ridley Pearson, I met him before I ever started writing my first book, and I said, how do you do it? He's written so many books. Kingdom Keepers, if you haven't ever read his series, it's young adult, about what happens at Disney overnight when the villains try to take over while the parks are closed. It's so awesome. And I asked him, I said, how am I going to get this done? He goes, wake up an hour early every day and write one page. And then, like Brad Paisley says, tomorrow is the first blank page of a 365-page book. Write a good one. So I'm sure I went over time. Let's see. Okay. So yes, thank you. I hope I gave you a couple of takeaways. It's definitely a bizarre topic, but we're here at Communications with Elvis, and you probably have ideas you've thought about, and you really, really can do it. So if anyone has any questions, I'll stay. I know you have lunch in a few minutes too. Oh, okay, cool. So what can I elaborate on or help you with? Does anybody want to chat about anything? Ask a question? Yes, ma'am. Great idea. Anyone who raised their hand, what are you writing about? Or you could just, maybe if you don't want to say what you're writing about, what genre are you thinking about? Yes, ma'am.
We published a poetry book for one of our sisters.
Very good. Very, very good.
Myself, before I came into this organization, I was working in entertainment, so I have a book about one of the soap operas that I wrote for their anniversary.
Awesome. Yay. Congratulations. Anyone else thinking about anything? Yes. Oh, great. So a family tree type, a genealogy type thing? Fiction? Love it. Love it. There's just so many humans on this planet and so many stories, and people inspire each other. So just keep going. Anyone else? Any questions about? Yes, Kim?
A lot of us get approached by sisters who might want to publish their own memoirs. How can we as communicators support them, or in our organization self-publish?
Right. I was going to ask you, you said you put together the poetry book. How did you guys do that?
We had someone in-house design it for us. We have a designer, and it had already been copyrighted like 12 years ago or something.
Okay.
And they said, well, we lost all the files, but here's the poems, and can you find new artwork? So we did new artwork, and then we put it together, and we just printed it ourselves and distributed it. And so we're selling it through Notre Dame.
Great. So did you worked with a printer then, and you have hard copies?
Yeah.
Awesome.
We printed 150 hard copies.
Yeah.
And they're selling them in the bookstore at one of our colleges, and 50 of them were gifted to sisters who were donating.
Lovely. Yes. I printed 1,000 of Waking Up in Graceland and have about 100 left. But then I was advised not to print 1,000 of book 2 because allegedly you never sell as many of your sequel as the first book. So I did 800, and I probably have 400 left. So I think I'll go digital with Waking Up in Graceland when I'm really low on quantity, and people will, if they really want to read both books and they want the hard copy, they can still buy Amazing Grace. It's not an ideal situation, but again, it was the route I chose. And then I just printed 300 Kitchen Bowl Gang, and we've sold half of them in about a year. So those are low quantities, but printers, that's why you want to work your printer relationships, because I feel like a couple printers maybe took a few bucks off of that for me just to help me get out there, because it is small. Yes, ma'am.
Do you do publishing and writing full-time now, or do you still have a full-time job and then do this on the weekend?
Great question. I am a full-time employee of Mercy, which is a healthcare system in Missouri, Arkansas, Oklahoma, and beyond. And that I've been with them about almost 6 months. Prior to that, 15 years with St. Patrick's Center. So I've truthfully not going to be able to quit my day job with these adventures that I've been on, but I wouldn't change it for anything. What I do is I make sure I make enough money to pay the printer. The printer's the first one you got to pay. Pay the editor, the designer, even the illustrator. I've given my mom, she wants Amazon cards, so keep sliding my mom the Amazon card so she can go buy what she wants. And then any money that's left goes into my bank account for the next project, and it's just kind of a rolling thing. Unless I write the great novel, I'm not going to be able to quit my day job. But I don't care. I'm going to have a box of books at the end. Yes, sir. Oh, that's a great question. I believe Waking Up in Graceland, it's about 200 pages. The cost was about $4.75 each. And the Kitchen Bowl Gang, which is, obviously different size and way fewer pages, but full color, was $4.29. What I'm getting now from the printers to try to do another children's book, they want $7 and $8 to print one copy. So that's how crazy paper is right now. So I didn't quite answer your question, but I remember those individual costs more than I remember the total bill. Any other questions? Are you, yes, ma'am. I'm sorry?
There's a lot to know that you put up here. How did you figure it all out?
I lived it. Yeah. I think that core decision, well, first was the light bulb going off and I was kind of bugging people with my Elvis craziness. I wasn't bugging Elvis fans, but my family was like, what is wrong with you? So the fact that I had that brainstorm on Beale Street was like God giving me this place to channel all that energy. I mean, I'm in it. And so I wrote, and that was the first thing. And the second thing was people saying, you got to print books. Don't make something for my Kindle. I want a book that you signed. So I feel like it's a lived experience, probably part of the reason why Kim thought of that, because she did say, there's sisters that would like to get their thoughts together and tell their stories. So I think that was the evolution of me being here. I'm so grateful to be with you. This is going to be another one of those great days of my life, so thank you. Have a good time. Jailhouse Rock? Who watched Jailhouse Rock last night? Did you like it? I mean, they picked a good movie for last night. It really kind of gets you, when he doesn't know if he can sing again. Oh my God. So, all right. I know there's a lot of sisters in this, but Elvis, no matter what, Elvis is one of the best looking men ever on the face of the planet.
Thank you so much.